What are you doing with your fork and knife? Oh, you must be from Europe. Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I have been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. And moving to a different country obviously comes with many culture shocks and surprises. And for me, some of those surprises were just everyday things that for some reason Americans do differently than we do in Germany. And that's why in this video, I'll be sharing 5 things that Americans do differently than Germans, things that I found really odd in the beginning, or maybe still find weird to this day. I've made 2 similar videos to this one before, so make sure to check those out as well. They're linked in the info box below, and this is going to be part 3. And a little tip, make sure to watch until the very end because I have 2 pretty exciting announcements to share. The first one has to do with eating. Now, I've already talked about the different restaurant experiences, but this one is about the actual act of getting food into your mouth. Overall, it's more common in the US to eat with your fingers than it is in Germany and some other European countries. Americans find it super weird, for example, that many Europeans eat pizza with a fork and knife. I think this one also just has a lot to do with how thin real Italian-style pizza is. At a good Italian restaurant, you're usually not even able to eat the pizza with your hand because it'll just hang down. I mean, we do eat some pizza with our hands in Germany too, just not always. And the fact that Americans eat more with their hands also has a lot to do with American fast food, of course, because there's just a lot of food here that can be and is supposed to be eaten with your hands. But even when you're at a restaurant and everyone's eating a dish with silverware, with fork and knife, people can always tell that I'm from Europe because I apparently do it differently than Americans do it. I had no idea about this before I came here. I mean, who would have thought that you could use your fork and knife differently in such a significant way that people actually notice it? So here's the difference. Most Americans I know, I'm sure there's exceptions, but they usually cut up their, let's say, steak with the knife in the right hand and the fork in the left hand. And then once they've cut it into pieces, they switch the fork back to the right hand and then eat the pieces they've previously cut, which to a lot of Europeans looks a little like what kids would do. I'm not trying to sound snobby or anything, you just won't see a lot of adults do that in Europe because we're taught to eat in a way that we keep the knife in the right hand the whole time. So we'll cut a piece off the steak and then right away stick it on our fork and then put it in our mouth. Sometimes we also just turn the fork around in our left hand and then use the knife to scoop things on it. And yes, this might sound like kind of a boring topic, but believe me, I've been asked about this so many times and Americans just look at the way I hold my silverware and they're like, oh, you must be European. Now this one took me a long time to realize and I still haven't adapted to this yet, and to be honest, I don't know if I ever will. In Germany, the start of the week is Monday, while in the US, the new week always starts on Sunday. So the calendars are different here, which I find really confusing because I'm just used to the first column of the calendar being Monday and then Saturday and Sunday being next to each other at the end. But here, calendars start with Sunday as the first day of the week and then Saturday is the last one, which is kind of odd to me since the business week obviously still starts on Monday in the US, and it also doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense because Saturday and Sunday are called weekend, Wochenende in German, so it's literally called the end of the week and not the end and the beginning of the week. Now I looked it up and the internet said that the way we do it in Germany is the international ISO 8601 standard, whatever that means, but some countries like the United States, Canada, Brazil, Japan, and some other countries consider Sunday the first day of the week. I read that it has a religious background, mainly a Jewish and a Christian one, because Sabbath is supposed to be the last day of the week, and that day is the equivalent to today's Saturday. I find this interesting because Europe has so much Christian history and culture, but apparently we didn't stick to the calendar thing. Now, before we move on to the next next point, I'd like to introduce today's sponsor, ExpressVPN, really quick. It's a VPN client that allows you to access the internet through an external server, which makes your internet connection more safe, and it also allows you to pick a server in another country, which means that you can browse the internet from a virtual location. You have 94 countries to pick from, so that way you can also access content from those countries that otherwise might be geo-blocked for you. For me, for example, it allows me to access the live stream of German TV channels like Pro7 or our public TV channels ARD or ZDF. It also gives me access to YouTube videos that are geo-blocked, and I can even access different content on Netflix because there are different shows and movies on the German Netflix. And so recently I've been using the German Netflix to rewatch my favorite show, How I Met Your Mother, because that one isn't on the American Netflix anymore, unfortunately. So the VPN client is the perfect solution for that. If you'd like to try a VPN client as well, I can definitely recommend ExpressVPN. I've tried many different ones ever since I moved here, and this one works really smoothly compared to others. There used to be free ones back in the day, but that has changed, so now they all cost you something. But you can get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Just click the link in the info box below and find out more. It's expressvpn.com/. Point number 3 on today's list is celebrating New Year's Eve. Americans and Germans do it very differently, and I personally absolutely prefer the German way. Now, this has to do with 2 things, and that is alcohol and fireworks. In Germany, New Year's Eve celebrations usually have a pretty big part that takes place outside, because to us, fireworks are a pretty important part of New Year's Eve, and we're also allowed to drink in public. Not all Germans go outside, of course, but I would say that it's more common than staying in. To me, a typical New Year's Eve in Germany is a night with friends or family. We usually have dinner, which traditionally is raclette, which I've talked about before. We do other traditions like lead pouring and watching this comedy piece called Dinner for One. We drink, play games, and then around midnight we go somewhere outside. Ideally a hill or a bridge where you have a great view at all the fireworks, because around New Year's Eve you can legally buy and shoot fireworks in most parts of Germany, and many people do that. There have been more and more cities in the past few years who banned fireworks in certain areas because of the pollution, and of course it's dangerous as well, but traditionally this is a big part of German New Year's celebrations. Silvester is what we call it in German. So we go outside before midnight, bring our champagne and maybe some glasses and sparklers and maybe fireworks, and then experience the countdown outside somewhere, possibly with a pretty big crowd of other people, and then cheers and enjoy the view. This year things are probably gonna be different, of course, but I'll definitely make a more detailed video about all the German New Year's Eve traditions when I'm in Germany later in December. Now, I've spent 2 New Year's Eves in the US so far, and I have to say that I was pretty surprised and also disappointed that it was so different and, in my opinion, a little boring here. Fireworks aren't really a traditional thing for New Year's here. It differs from state to state because of the laws, but in many states there are some public fireworks, but you're not allowed to buy and shoot fireworks yourself around that time. Instead, the main fireworks day in the US really is 4th of July and not New Year's like in Germany. Like for 4th of July, people do shoot fireworks, not so much on December 31st. Instead, I'd say that most parties are just indoor parties that, except for people dressing a little more nicely, aren't very different from any other party, and at midnight people usually turn on the TV and watch the countdown and the ball drop on Times Square in New York City, or they watch some other TV show, and then it's tradition to kiss at midnight, which we do too in Germany, but I feel like the midnight kiss has more relevance here since there aren't a lot of other traditions. And then the party just continues. I'm sure a lot of people will comment that that's not how they celebrate New Year's Eve in the US. Of course, there's also many events you can attend in both countries, at bars and clubs, but from my personal experience and also what I've seen in movies, this indoor party thing is pretty common in the US. This one is a pretty small difference, but it really threw me off in the beginning, and it's that when you say thank you to someone, Americans sometimes just reply with or or just yep, which to them is another way of saying you're welcome. From what I've heard, this might be a regional and generational thing, but here in Cincinnati, people say that all the time, like when they hold the door for you, for example, and you say thank you, and then they go, And this is something that we don't do in Germany. If we want to say you're welcome, we always use words. So to me, the always sounded more annoyed than friendly in the beginning. You know, kind of like, thank you, kind of like, yeah, you better say thank you. Nowadays, I know that this isn't supposed to be rude at all, and I've actually caught myself say that a few times too. I'll just have to make sure that I don't do it in Germany, because over there, people are totally gonna think that I'm annoyed with them and being disrespectful. So this one wasn't new to me when I came here, and I'm sure most of you know about this too, but I honestly didn't think it would be this extreme here. Americans love, love, love ice in their beverages. So whenever you order something at a restaurant, whether that's just a cup of water, a soda, or even a cocktail, it'll be full of ice. And by that, I don't mean 1 or 2 or 3 ice cubes. No, it's usually half the cup that's full with it. And even when Americans get their own drink at a soda fountain, for example, most of them fill up their cup with ice before they get the drink. To most Europeans, this is just a little odd because first of all, we feel like you don't need your drink to be that cold, like 2 ice cubes would have been enough, or even no ice at all, since many beverages are refrigerated anyways. Then we ask ourselves, why would you want to pay for a 16-ounce cup of soda when really most of it is filled up with ice cubes instead of the actual drink? And lastly, why would you want to water down your drink with all that ice and ruin the flavor? Once again, Americans just seem to be a little over the top with this, but that's just what this country is known for anyways. I mean, I've talked about how Americans totally overdo it with the AC, in my opinion, and cool down their places to the point where I'll have to wear a scarf inside in the summer. And going back to the whole drink topic, I noticed that even the fridges are oftentimes set to a lower temperature than they are in Germany. And beer is usually served ice cold here instead of just cold, which is probably the reason why many Americans believe that we drink our beer warm in Germany, because compared to a half frozen beer, we only drink ours refrigerated, which means that you can still actually taste some of the flavor. So to all Americans, be prepared that when you go to Europe and order a drink, you might not get any ice in that. So if you want some, you'll have to explicitly ask for it, and even then you'll probably only get a couple ice cubes. Same goes for Europeans who visit the US. If you don't want your drinks to be half ice, you'll have to make sure to order your drink without ice. Those were my 5 things Americans do differently than Germans part 3, so make sure to check out the previous parts to this as well. I've talked about how we sleep differently, how we write our numbers differently. I talked about saying hello and answering the phone, about race, and many other things. The videos are linked in the info box below. Now, before I say goodbye, I have 2 exciting announcements. The first one is that my friends from the Americans in Germany Drinking Whiskey podcast have invited me to be on their podcast again. I was on one of their episodes a few months ago when we talked about the 2 different perspectives, me living in the US as a German and them living in Berlin as Americans. And this time we talked about growing up in Germany versus the US. It was a really interesting topic. The episode is out on October 21st, so check it out. Americans in Germany Drinking Whiskey. Link is also in the info box below. And I have a pretty big surprise myself that I'll reveal on Thursday, October 22nd. So make sure to activate the bell for notifications, or just check back in on my channel on October 22nd to find out what my news are, my surprise. It may or may not include Josh as well. I'm super excited. I hope you are too, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, you can follow me on social media, join the Patreon family, and of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I hope I'll see you on Thursday. Tschüss!